Back, here we go. Moist heat methods. First ones that we'll look at is boil, simmering, and poach. They're all immersed in a hot liquid or water, different temperatures. Boiling, 212, good for starches, vegetables. Simmer is cooking 185 to 205. And that's probably the most used, you're simmering something, whether it's a stew, a braise, a lot of things where the bubbles are just gently hitting the surface. Poaching is another little bit lower temperature, 160 to 180 degrees. And this is great for what foods? Chicken, fish. Liquid is often brought to a boil first before adding food. And that way, water or liquid takes a lot of energy to bring it up to temperature. And then when you add something, it'll come back to a boil or simmer much more quickly. Whereas if you just put in your food item into cold water, it's just going to take a long time for it to heat up and come up to a simmer or boil. Or blanch, to cook an item partially and briefly, usually in water. And you basically bring the water to a boil, usually it's like a vegetable, think of asparagus, put it in for a couple, 2-3 minutes, plunge it in the cold ice water. For service, then you're just reheating it. You're not cooking the asparagus all the way during service. All French fries that you've come frozen have already been blanched, and blanching is about 300 degrees in deep fat, and it basically is cooking the potato, but it's not giving it any color. And then when for service, you're cooking at 350, so it's heating it through and then browning it. But all frozen. If you just put a potato in a freezer, it would turn out black. And so moist heat methods, I guess something to talk about too is as altitude increases, boiling temperature decreases. So that's why when you go up into the mountains, 3,000 degrees, I think it's 1 degree Fahrenheit. So if you go up 10,000 feet, the water, instead of boiling at 212, will actually boil at 202. And that's why it takes things longer to cook, because you think the water is boiling, which it is, but the temperature of the water is not the same as at sea level. Steaming is another great way to cook things. It exposes things directly to steam. It's a quick way to cook things without losing nutrients. Is another where you have your fish or chicken, maybe some herbs and vegetables, and you wrap it in parchment. Some people use foil, but if you do it in parchment, you can put it in the oven, and then you could take it right put it on a plate, take it out in the dining room, and then when you open up the bag in front of the customer, they get that waft of the fresh herbs and smells of whatever else spices, herbs are in there. And remember, steam carries much more energy, over 500 times the energy of just plain water. So it's a very quick way to cook things. Pressure cookers are starting to make a comeback. As you increase the pressure from 5 to 10 to 15 pounds per square inch, the boiling temperature goes up. So that's why you can cook things very quickly. Beans are a great thing. If you want to cook some black beans quickly, instead of number of hours, you can get them done in an hour or so. Or beets, you can cook beets in a pressure cooker in about 15 minutes. Braising is it's a combination heat method. Braising is like larger pieces of meat, and stewing is more smaller pieces of meat, bite size. But again, generally they're similar. And I think this needs just some clarification. When people talk about braising, you cook it covered, but you're cooking it covered with the lid. The amount of liquid should not cover the meat. The liquid should only be about halfway up the piece of meat. Otherwise, you're just boiling it. And another general rule of thumb is if you're making, a pot roast or something, braising a brisket, you put in about as much stock as you want sauce. So if you want it to end up with about a half gallon of sauce, you'd put in about a half gallon of stock. And you always brown it first, braised. Looks like pork shoulder maybe. Braising can be done on the range or in the stove. The stove has several advantages. It's more uniform cooking. Less attention is required. You can just pretty much bring the liquid up to a boil, cover it, put it in the stove, and just let it cook. Microwave, they do come in a number of wattages. A lot of commercial establishments like restaurants, their microwaves might be 1500, 2000 watts, whereas a lot of homes are maybe 500 or 1000. And it's great for heating small portions of stuff instead of holding food such as rice in a steam table. Just quick couple characteristics, special points to consider. It does not brown. Overcooking is quite common. Defrost, it works on moisture, so if you put something in frozen, it should be put on the defrost cycle, which is a little bit lower power usage. Make sure you wrap foods, and that kind of traps in the steam, which helps cook it, heat it up quicker. Sous vide is cooking under a vacuum. This sort of term is applied to cooking foods that have been vacuum sealed in plastic bags. The heart of sous vide cooking is the precision, the temperature control, because in water is a much better conductor of heat than air. And there is this video here if you'd like to watch. You can just click on the link, and they show cooking a perfect egg 63 degrees centigrade for 2 minutes, and it just comes out perfect. Considerations when you're thinking about sous vide, it's a lot of times they'll sous vide it and then sear it afterwards. Sometimes people will do the reverse, sear it first, then put it in. Other general ideas, sous vide, you can do steaks or pot roasts. My neighbor will sous vide his hamburgers. He'll put them in the sous vide for a half hour at, I think it's like 120 degrees, and it's just barely rare. But then you'll take it out to the grill, finish it on the grill, and it's a perfect medium rare. And the thing is that's nice about it is the medium rare goes almost from edge to edge instead of just that kind of the middle quarter part of your hamburger. Almost the whole hamburger is medium rare. Tender cuts, meats and poultry, generally want to go at least 4 hours. And in class, if we were in class, I've done beef brisket or shoulder for 48 or 64 hours. Sometimes I've done it over the weekend, and then Monday morning we've got some tasty tidbits to eat. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Fish and seafood. One thing to think about here is this shellfish temperature is usually around 140 degrees. But now all of a sudden you're going to think about your sanitation class and 140. But remember, 145, 150 is lethal kill, for an instant. Whereas if you bring your food to 140 degrees and then cook it and hold it there for 10 minutes, that also kills any bacteria. So that's how you can get away at the little bit lower temperatures, because you're bringing it up to that temperature and then holding it. So again, you're working with a vacuum seal item, which then you can get an anaerobic bacteria, and the one that we're most familiar with is botulism, which if you get botulism, you can die from it. So if you are going to sous vide anything or put anything in a vacuum, you need your HACCP plan and present that to the health department, and they will approve it. And then last is, now that I'm dizzy, the 36 cooking terms. So basically, just look through the book, or you could also Google them and just go through the 36 terms and write them up. There you have it. Hopefully, I tried to go through this video a little bit quicker so that you have no time to pick up your phone and you're just focused on the video. But now you're done with the video. Go text your mom or dad or anyone. That's it.